So
Okay.
apologies, maybe we just wait another few minutes to see whether Koffi manages to join before we start. But maybe Julia, you want to start a little bit with general outline.
Yes. So, hi everyone. Thanks and welcome to our third and today's final and last panel in this frame of this year's 154 forum. Thanks for everyone. Thanks for our panelists who are coming in one after the other. I'm Julia, and this is my colleague Yvette. We are the editors-in-chief and founders of the magazines Contemporary End and Contemporary End America Latina. And what we're focusing on today, the global connections, work very much into a practice we have been focusing on as CN and Contemporary and America Latina during the last years since we launched CN in 2013. So this idea of a global diaspora in relation to Africa and the question of how can we define an idea of a global blackness beyond boxes, beyond stereotypes, beyond breaking it down to questions of what is art from Africa, etc. So these questions of shared experiences, different experiences of artists from African perspectives who are literally working and living all over the place, and many of them in a constant state of flux as well. So these questions, as I said, apply or work very much into our own practice. So that's why we're very excited to have this panel today. We initially planned to realize this panel with, as you might know or have written, three great panelists, Evan, Ifekoya, Koffi, Mensah, and Sepake Angiama. Unfortunately, Sepake can't join us today due to family circumstances, and as you see, Koffi, who's in Burkina Faso, has still some technical challenges or issues. So we're still waiting for him to come in. And maybe, as you have seen, as Koffi is French speaking, understands English, but we have a live translator as well for those who feel more comfortable listening to the panel. No, not who understand him speaking French, obviously, but he will be translated into English. So that way around. So it's all very complicated, but yeah, hopefully, and I'm very optimistic that we're gonna yeah, work this out, and then we can start in about 1 or 2 minutes.
Just also for everyone, for your information, that yes, this talk is being recorded. So tell your friends who didn't make it that they can watch this on the 154 YouTube channel, and there will be also a podcast of the audio. So to follow up, and also the chat is open, so you're all more than welcome to send in questions or comments, or you know, we had it before with other talks that people would start telling us from where they're actually tuning in, which was quite amazing to see, because it was literally all over the place, from Chile to the Dominican Republic. So yeah, just we're really happy also to have an active interaction with you as the audience.
Yeah, as long as the internet allows us to. So
yes.
And if Koffi doesn't manage to join us in the end due to technical circumstances, etc., we will talk to Evan about their practice, etc. But that will reduce the time of the panel as well. So we won't talk for an entire hour if it's just the three of us. So.
Yeah, so I just got a message from Olivia, who's coordinating this. Koffi has still having trouble getting through. Mm-hmm. Maybe we just get started, Evan, and then we'll see whether he manages to join in or not. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We're very happy to see you. Of course, always. And I'm just gonna continue talking while I see that Koffi is arranging himself. And I will start by maybe just briefly reading out your short bio. So for those of you in the audience who don't know Evan's work. So Evan is an artist and an energy worker who through sound, text, video, and performance
avec la vidéo,
places demands on existing systems and institutions of power to recenter and prioritize the experience and voice of those previously marginalized. Through archival and sonic investigations, they speculate on Blackness in abundance, the body of the ocean, a watery embodied presence in the work. This is already very poetic as a biography. Like we could already, go into this, but I'm gonna go into also some of the data. So Evan established the collectively run and QT BPOC led Black Obsidian Sound System, acronym BOSS, in 2018. In 2019, they won the Kleinwort Hamburg's Emerging Artist Prize, and in 2017, the Arts Foundation Award for Live Art sponsored by Yoma Suspect Estate. They have presented exhibitions and performances across Europe and internationally, most recently at the Liverpool Biennial in 2021, Gus Fisher, New Zealand, the Upper Netherlands, and Gasworks, London. So yeah, you've been around and we're very happy to have you here. And the reason why we also invited you to this panel is just to connect back to what Julia was saying, this constant or this huge question of the global diaspora and those connections and histories and narratives, which has all these complexities, but at the same time, there are also certain shared experiences and narratives that, bring people back together and have this kind of exchange. And so maybe it would be great if you could start by talking a bit about your practice, because you've been have been doing research in archives on these notions of Blackness in various compositions and in terms of sociality and inheritance. And what I really find very interesting also thinking about this in the frame of sound and how that actually resonates, and looking into, you went to clubs and in queer life, nightlife. And I think this is a very important, interesting approach that often is maybe a bit underestimated maybe. So I think this is really interesting if you could go into that, how you ended up there, but also how you implement that then into your work and into your, practice in a general.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you, Yvette and Julia, for the invitation. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. So yeah, how to start. But I mean, yeah, sound and music has always played, a big part in my life and my practice. And I would say that, for me, music comes before art in a way. Part of me doesn't really understand how I ended up an artist when, really sort of, sound and, the act of listening is really something that I would say I foreground kind of the visual, even though there is definitely a very visual aspect to my work. And, I would say that, the work that I'm going to kind of focus on here, the project that you kind of mentioned me wanting to bring up, a score, a groove, a phantom, really kind of began when I was thinking about the relationship between, specifically for Black folk, the relationship between our politics and our social life, and thinking about how the social center or the nightclub was often a space where those two things could and did and do come together, in the present, but also in historically. And I was kind of interested in that in relation to the sort of the more recent present. I mean, of course, I could go all the way back to, the transatlantic slave trade, and I could go even further back, to sort of specifically kind of more ancestral, and for me being of Nigerian heritage, I could go all the way back. But, for me, I was really focused on like the sort of the Black social center in the UK, in London, how people of the diaspora would come together in these spaces, often building sound systems, or finding bits of technology to pull together sound systems. And that was often how, where people would meet and would gather, and where they would kind of seek or find refuge.
Yeah.
In what was and still is, an incredibly hostile environment.
Yeah.
And so, I was doing sort of research within archives, and I became specifically interested in how, the sort of the meeting point between also Blackness and sexuality and queerness, and how that also impacted what was available and what tools people could have access to. And then in 2018, I was invited to do an exhibition at Gasworks in London, and I knew that I wanted it to be a sound-led exhibition. And at some point, I just thought, well, rather than just producing a sound work that lived on a sound system that we bought in or hired, why not take this also as an opportunity to bring something into being that didn't exist in our present. And that is, the queer Black sound system that came to life as a result of the exhibition, which is called Black Obsidian Sound System. And I'm going to talk about why I named it that, in a little bit. But so the sound system was built with members of my community, and I specifically and intentionally invited women and non-binary people to build in that system, because I think also, historically, the sound system has very much been a male-dominated project and endeavor. And that was also something that I wanted to challenge, because actually I did find instances within the archive of women building, maintaining and running their own systems, groups like Sister Culture and Systematic, I saw evidence of it, but I wasn't seeing that in the kind of the present, or, within the kind of the present moments. I thought, you know what, again, let's take the opportunity to manifest this, to bring this into being. So we built the sound system over a number of weeks, and then, it formed part of the show. And some people may have seen that. I don't know if an image was included in the invite. So but then after the show, again, I sort of intentionally decided that the sound system would then become its own autonomous thing. It's now what I consider a gift for my community. So rather than it continue to be something that is an art object and kind of continue to travel with the exhibition, because the exhibition does travel, but instead I kind of separated the system from the exhibition, and now we run the sound system as its own resource, its own kind of itinerant, moving kind of beacon. I also think about it as a totem, and it's called Black Obsidian Sound System, and I called it that because obsidian is it's a stone of truth and protection. So again, I wanted to kind of imbue it with a kind of energetic kind of sacred power in a way. And it travels with us, and as a collective, we run it, we maintain it. And that was always kind of what I intended for it to be and to do. And again, it was very much drawing on and kind of calling on traditions that are very much part of mine, and the people who are involved, like heritage, and really wanting to speak to that, but also kind of wanting to present a new option and a new possibility for what these kinds of objects can be, and who can run them, and who can maintain them, and who can be part of its legacy, the legacy of projects such as this.
Yeah.
So I think I'll leave it there for now. But
thank you. I mean, I think there are lots of things to pick up on, but maybe as Koffi seems to be now here, we just welcome you. Hi, Koffi. So great that you could join us. We're very happy to see you, and I hope you hear us also. Okay.
I can hear us.
Oui, je vous entends bien.
Okay, super.
Perfect. So,
m'entendez aussi?
yes, not too loud, but we can we can hear you. And we would love to, because, you know, as we mentioned, we're focusing on questions around a representation and the idea of a global diaspora in relation to Africa, even an idea of a global blackness, and want to elaborate a little bit on this through working, talking about your practices. And can you hear me? Yes, huh? Super, okay. And I was wondering, focusing on your practice, during a virtual residency you had at the Goethe Institute in Salvador de Bahia in Brazil, you first got in touch with Brazilian cultural producers, and one of your projects which sounded very interesting was you portrayed, you know, something you've done already, obviously, you portrayed public figures from Africa, different names, different big important names, which obviously from a Western perspective have been ignored for a long time, but you portrayed them. And that, by doing this, you prompted a multidisciplinary group of key members of the public in Salvador and experts in Brazil to analyze your work and start an online dialogue with you, which we find extremely fascinating and interesting. Could you tell us a bit more about the project and these conversations which came?
I think he's waiting for translation so that you know he has a French translation for you in the audience.
The interpreter is trying to get to hear what he's saying.
Oui?
Can I have the translation, please?
Ah, yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's, yeah, so the interpreter should translate it to you soon, I hope. Maybe. Okay.
I have already translated while you were asking the question.
Guess maybe she's in contact with the interpreter.
But I mean, Marie, we just heard you. Julia, you heard the interpreter? She was just talking.
Ah, okay.
I'm sorry. I did try. I was doing the interpretation while you were asking the question, and I don't know if he could hear me. I'm just going to try it again. I'm sorry about that.
I can read it to you again as well if you like.
Is Koffi on the French channel to get the French?
Yeah, translation.
Koffi, vous êtes sur la chaîne française? Vous êtes sur la chaîne française? Est-ce que vous m'entendez? C'est l'interprète qui vous parle. I don't think he can hear me.
Ah, yeah, maybe.
Koffi, can you hear us? Yeah, can you look down down there on the screen? There is different channels for translation. Can you click on French? Then you should be able to hear the translator.
Koffi, vous m'entendez? Vous m'entendez, Koffi? Est-ce que si vous voulez, est-ce que vous pourriez appuyer en bas de l'écran sur French ou français selon, pour que je puisse vous traduire la question, s'il vous plaît? I'm not sure. I'm not sure he can hear me.
I think.
It's the French one now. Maybe he's done it.
Yeah.
Oui, je vous entends, j'ai cliqué sur le... Ouais.
Well, it seems he
Je l'ai pas un petit peu entendu, désolé. Je n'ai rien entendu.
Okay.
Non, non, tu peux le comprendre.
Yeah. The audience very sorry.
He didn't hear my translation, so can we have like a condensed version of the question so I can relay it to him?
I just wanted to hear his experiences from the project he did in Salvador during his residency at the Goethe Institute. Yes, in Salvador, and the interesting what is this conversation it produced, the portraits of public figures from Africa he produced, and this kind of created this multidisciplinary group and members in Brazil who were very interested and wanted to analyze this work. And I just wanted, want to hear a little bit about this.
Okay.
Sounds super.
Okay, so that was a project.
You can't hear.
It's so low.
Ok. Alors, comme ça, vous m'entendez?
Yeah.
Ok. Donc,
Let's
je
go.
disais que c'était un projet qu'on avait.
There was a project that we had at Salvador de Bahia. And I went to Brazil for the project in 2019. And I could not go there, but a group of passionate artists were very interested in my work. And so we did an online residence. It was a very interesting work, very rich in exchange. And a lot of colleagues wanted to know how I worked with cutting out. So most often, the how is not really important. It is a technique, but it is quite unique. But the important thing is why I do this. I want to express about the body and the soul as a visual. So I just cut out the first layer represents the body, which I cut out, and underneath the underneath layer, which is a collage of magazines, newspapers, etc., represents the soul. So it is an illusion, if you will, because there's this superposition of two layers. Oui, ça y est, j'ai traduit.
D'accord. Okay.
And that's it.
No, because I was wondering, because as you mentioned, it was an online residency, because obviously he couldn't travel to Brazil. This kind of encounter between him and
Finalement, on a fait ça virtuel. Finalement, on a fait virtuel parce que je ne pouvais pas me déplacer à cause de Covid-19. Mais on a remis ça sur l'année prochaine.
Right, they did it because he couldn't go there, and they postponed it. That was a residency that was very important for me. Because I realize with Brazil that we have a lot of similarities, and beyond the technical aspect.
Il y a eu beaucoup de liens où j'ai compris que nous vivons d'autres réalités et au-delà de ce que je fais comme activité artistique, parce que moi je m'appuie beaucoup sur la récupération.
Sorry, there are.
Yeah.
pas simplement de rouler dans une voiture électrique, mais toute une philosophie d'un état d'âme.
I am really sorry. I'm having a hard time understanding because the sound keeps ebbing and flowing.
Maybe you can ask him to speak up a little bit.
Nous avons des liens. Oui. Ok. Ok. Désolé. Oh, sorry. Donc, je disais, comme ça, c'est bon?
Oui, très bien. Yes. Yes.
Allô? C'est bon? C'est bon maintenant?
Oui.
Ok. Donc, je disais que dans nos échanges...
In our exchange, a lot of things came out beyond what is technical, what is work.
Mm-hmm.
Salvador de Bahia has a lot of Black people who live there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found really interesting is that I work a lot with upcycling. And so I use a lot of newspapers, old magazines, a lot of things that I have gathered. And I realized that people there are in the same kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, yeah, it's almost an environment-friendly approach. You don't need just to drive an electric car to be environment-friendly. You can do it by recycling, upcycling, which I do a lot, and which people in Salvador de Bahia do as well. So even we do not have the same practices or techniques, but we have the same goals as human beings. And especially being passionate with art, we have the same goals.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thanks so much. Maybe we can come back to Evan, because after you explaining and elaborating, going into explaining your talking about your practice.
Ouais.
I know I'm asking Evan now. Yes, and I was wondering, Evan, you mentioned the very important clubs, historical clubs, but just current or recent clubs, club culture, Black social centers, etc., as social places of encounter and refuge, encounter and safe spaces as well. And I was wondering, how do you see in comparison to that? Because I love when you said I started with music and not with art. And how do you see the art space, the art institution in the opposite? How do you feel exhibiting there? Because obviously you have a lot of exhibitions going on right now as well. So
okay.
No, I mean Evan now. Yeah.
I'll answer that. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I think for me, something that's I think has always been part of my practice is a desire to challenge the existing kind of mode or way of doing something, and I think for me, as I mentioned, like I want to take, or my vision for being with and going to art is to create a space that can be where one can feel like completely immersed and transformed. I often, on my last few exhibitions, I create spaces where one can sit, where one can lie down, where one can pause, where one can reflect. There's a bunch of different things happening that can be looked at, that can be felt, that can be smelled sometimes, because I think on the one hand, I want to disrupt that art is just about, and I think we've gone beyond the idea that it has to be a white cube or it has to just be about looking, but then also simultaneously I want to challenge the idea that like a sound exhibition has to be all white walls as well, because often or my experience of sound in art spaces is very like, it has to be very neutral, it has to be
minimal.
floor. You know, so like the show at the Apple, for example, you know, that was like the walls were black, you know, the light was, there was like different kinds of spotlights depending on the space. I used reds, I used blue, I used purples, you know, so I wanted to create these sort of zones. And then with, you know, the gasworks show Ritual Without Belief, there was more light, but there was also this, you know, this ocean floor kind of crashing, you know, against the walls, and, you know, I'd curve the walls.
Yeah, great.
I'm really interested in this idea of like pushing with or testing the constraints of a space. You know, I really do. Yeah, I think about how sound can really occupy and transform space as well.
And how do you?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of to make a connection between what you were saying about space and Koffi's experience. And you also talking about new options thinking around the digital space, because this was now for Koffi, also for you was a very specific experience to actually not be able to go to Brazil, and at the same time making these very important connections and seeing that there is something that you have in common. And I mean, for you, Evan, as well, it's like, you know, these safe spaces you're describing, I'm sure they're still there, but they kind of moved somewhere else. And so, I mean, I think maybe Koffi, you can also go into this a little bit, what that means also for your practice as a very hands-on practice, like you just described, you know, with the upcycling, and what this residency maybe had also, what kind of influence it had in that way with, you know, have this sort of digital layer of it, but then going back to a very physical work in the real space, let's say.
Ok, merci pour la question.
Thank you for asking me. I'd like to reply to Yvette about what I said. It's about, I like the fact that they talked about the unconventional space. I'm not someone who's academic, I'm self-taught. So my motto is that even though I don't have anything against academia, in my everyday life, I do what I do, and being self-taught is something that can appeal to a general audience, and it allows people from the general public to put into focus people's personalities a bit more, which is why I focus on upcycling use in installations. And the impact on the online residency was that I discovered other fields to go beyond what I do in person, if you will. When I do an exhibition today, it's someone who's local will come, would come and do it. But nowadays, with modern technologies, we can go beyond this. We break those rules of person-to-person contact. We're experiencing a boom today, and we have to rely on the possibility, on those new possibilities that technology bring. And so my online residency allowed me to meet people I wouldn't have met otherwise, and to go beyond physical contact. So, in Africa, we have we are used to being in contact with each other. It's something that is part of our traditions. I think it's because of the climate, the heat, etc. Whereas on the other side of the Atlantic or whatever, there's not as it's not the same. It's not the same climate, and we sort of exchanged those climate differences. I brought my warmth, and they brought their cooler temperatures, if you will. And so not having to go there sort of was a gain of time as well and energy. So it was a win-win situation.
Okay, thank you. Evan, could you also maybe say something about that?
About the digital space?
Well, in the way how that is impacted your work, because it was somehow accelerated through that situation. Now, if we think about connecting with people beyond maybe our local geographies and thinking around the spaces that you were just describing before also, which are very physical.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, you know, nightlife, and I think, yeah, how the system, you know, if I talk about the sound system specifically for a moment, you know, how that operates now, yeah, things are really up in the air, and we are having, you know, as a collective, a lot of conversation about how we navigate this moment. You know, like I have organized one Zoom rave as a fundraiser, but I have to say, even though it was, you know, it was fun, I think it was more the novelty. Like, I'm really not convinced that virtual raves are the future. You know, I think for me, you lose a lot. You know?
Yeah.
There's, you know, yeah, for me, it very quickly lost its charm, actually, beyond the rave. But one thing that I have enjoyed doing is organizing kind of smaller scale gatherings. I think what actually works best, or in my experience, in terms of the digital space, is when you can kind of gather in sort of small pockets and still connect with people intimately. I think when you kind of have rooms full of like 300 odd people, I think, yeah, you can really lose something. But like, for example, you know, I sometimes do like a drumming circle, and you know, where people can kind of just be and journey and things like that, again, because, you know, the sonic and, you know, is very important to me, just to be able to be with a beat, a drum, a rhythm. Like, it's also a very meditative thing. And I think when you do that in a small group, I think you can really get something from the experience that, you know, is maybe not too dissimilar from being, you know, physically together. But I think once you start to think you have to have like a huge quantity, that for me is when things get lost. So yeah, I think this moment is encouraging us to kind of like scale down, scale back, work more intimately, work more privately. You know, a lot of the things I'm doing at the moment are just, you know, they're happening behind the scenes. You know, we're just like, again, we're filling the cup. You know, I'm very much in a moment of like just filling the cup, nourishing myself and my, you know, immediate communities.
Yeah. What I found interesting, that both of you kind of are interested in the idea of a, let's say, general audience or a public who maybe, Evan, you mentioned that already, normally maybe would feel attracted or attached so much more to a sound system than going into a museum, for example. Yeah. And I was wondering, maybe Evan, a question to you first, how you think, because, you know, your sound system, I see it really as a, as you say, movable place of encounter. It's there, and it's a place for people, and it moves. It's not fixed. Yeah. But if you do, even if you transform exhibition spaces into places way beyond the white cube, yeah, how do you think about how to draw in audiences who normally wouldn't come into, you know, in an exhibition space, be it big or small, but who just wouldn't feel addressed by it? How do you think about this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's quite a big question, and responsibility to feel that I mean, don't get me wrong, when I make work, I'm definitely thinking about the experience that I want the viewer or the audience to have, but I don't sit with like, how do I bring a different kind of audience? You know, for me, I have to trust in the work. I have to trust in what the work or what I believe the work is doing, you know, and I have to trust that the people who need it will be drawn to it and then will find their way to it. You know, I think for me, I work with great intention. You know, I imbue everything I do with intention and purpose, you know, and whether that is 2 or 200 or 2,000 people, like for me, the work reaches the people who need it in a moment in time, you know, and so I really have to just be with that and trust in that.
And Koffi, how is it with you? Yes, how important obviously is because you mentioned the idea of a general audience who you want to speak to with your art. How intensely do you think about the audience when you create work? Because Evan was just elaborating on that. Yeah, how important is?
Étant donné, bon, moi, étant donné que
So for me, because my practice is very much rooted in social aspect, my experience with my audience is not that numbers matter.
Yeah.
In my imagination, when I visualize my audience, they're not conventional people. It's more about sensitivity. In our field, the best gratification of an artist is when your work touches the public. It makes you go, wow. And when they go, wow, how do you do that? How do you do that? That's the best gratification, the best reward. Then, of course, then it's good if you get grants and money to help. But the best reward is to be recognized. When I work, I like meeting my public, my audience. My best wish, my biggest wish is to find people who are sensitive to what I do, who are touched by what I do. The project has to be designed for the public. Otherwise, there's no use. The work, the creation itself, has to address that public. Otherwise, there's no impact. So, in terms of preparing the project, I'm sorry, it's breaking off.
Yeah.
I think he just froze, no?
Yeah, that's a shame.
So maybe just to just kind of bring these things together, I think it's just interesting to see also what you were saying, Koffi, in terms of these localities, in a sense of that you talk about a very specific audience that you know is also the local audience. Also, Evan, when you say those people who need it, that will come, which I really like, because I also really believe in that. And I think it's also a good example with what you experienced, Koffi, with that online residency in Brazil, that suddenly still these kind of exchange and conversations came, and you just saw these joint ideas that you would have with those on the other side of that digital space. And I think this is maybe also in this current moment with this question where we started with these global connections of the diaspora. So I think it's also good to see that there's not an either or in terms of where to you connect to. So I think it's always like maybe this more introspective. At the same time, this can also mean something that is very relevant by sort of, you know, sending out certain, you know, vibes or knowledges, and then and also connections. And I think this is maybe also really relevant for thinking around what that means if you are part of the diaspora like you, Evan, or if you're like actually based in a different sort of locality.
Yeah. So yeah, I think maybe we wrap it up, and that was a good wrap up, Yvette. So yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Koffi, you want to say something?
Thank you, and thank you.
Yes,
it was a pleasure to be here.
Yes, so great that we managed to to overcome the technical restrictions, etc., and that we could talk. And thanks to you, Evan. Thanks so much. That was really, really superb. And thanks to you, Koffi, and thanks to Marie. That was amazing as well.
Very welcome.
Yes, that is. We know how hard this profession is. So thanks so much, and thanks to the audience. Thanks that you managed and could follow us on this very special encounter. But we enjoyed it a lot, and thanks so much. And hope to see you soon in flesh. And until then.
Ouais, bien sûr, c'est un plaisir pour nous. Merci à vous aussi.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes. So, and thanks to you, to the audience, and speak to you soon and see you soon. And
bye.
Au revoir. À bientôt. Merci.
À bientôt.
Au revoir.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.